Luis, for joining us with the author chat for today. It's a pleasure to be here together again.
So I'm Susie Gronseth, and I am teaching a course that a lot of people involved in the book study, Megan, are a part of. And so we kind of know each other in other spaces outside of this chat. I also am involved with the International Society for Technology and Education, particularly the Inclusive Learning Network, which both Kendra and Luis and Helen and other people who may have been doing some retweeting and commenting on some of the things we've been sharing in this study are part of. And it's a great professional community of educators from all over the world that are interested in how we can reduce barriers for learners and design instruction so that it's more inclusive, and thinking about issues of learner variability. And we use the framework of universal design for learning, as well as other approaches to more inclusive instructional design. And so it's been a good way for me to continue to expand my own thinking and understanding in these areas. And I'm at the higher education level. I'm at the University of Houston in Texas, and so I've been there for 7 years, but I've also worked in corporate training, and I was an ed tech coordinator at a middle school on a reservation in Arizona for a few years, and got my start in school for students with emotional and behavioral disorders. So I started out in a dual cert special education, elementary education program, and started working with students who have specific learning disabilities, and then kind of navigated to some other areas in education. So, so yeah, that's a little bit about me. How about we get started with, I'll have a question, and then I'd like everybody to have a chance to ask you guys questions. So I'll just kind of get us started. The first thing that I thought would be interesting to talk about was where you got the idea for this book, for Kendra and Luis. So where did you say, hey, I think we should write a book about this?
Go ahead, Luis. You tell it best.
You can do it, Kendra, if you want, and I'll fill
No,
it.
you always tell it so well. There's a bunch of reasons, and I know Luis and I, we go back and forth on some of the catalysts. One of them was we were at the ISTE conference, and we were in the networking fair. And I'll probably get the exact phrase wrong, but we were talking about universal design and inclusive instruction, and a person went by and said, well, I don't have any of those students in my classroom. And we realized with that the idea of what we were trying to talk about was really almost compartmentalized into special education. And we really started to think about how can we make what we believe in to kind of be universal for all learners, not just these students who maybe so-called struggle in the classroom. And the other, for me personally, the catalyst was I was in assistive technology in a school district back in the late 90s, and I thought, in 10 years, everyone's going to have access to this technology, and everyone will be able to use it in the classroom, and all of these screen reading and all that will be available. And lo and behold, 20 some odd years later, we're still struggling to get that accessibility. So part of it was really to start to talk about it in a way and have people understand how they might use it in a way that's not kind of just both kids or just about technology, but really how we can build that into our instruction. So it was really important for me when I was looking at writing the book. Luis, I'm sure you've got some.
Well, no, you got the anecdote right. That's exactly what I was going to say.
It's a long day today.
But Kendra and I had worked together on an online course. So I'm the current president of the ISTE Inclusive Learning Network. And prior to being the current president, I was professional learning chair. And one of the roles of the professional learning chair is to sort of plan programming for our members so that they keep expanding their knowledge base, right? And so one of the things that we did on one year, Kendra and I and another colleague of ours, Betsy Dalton, we designed an online course, which we call the SOOC. So some of you may be familiar with the MOOC, a massive online open course, or as I call it, weapons of mass instruction, because it's, there's a lot of people sign up, but very few of them complete it. And so we try to do something a little bit different, where we design a course which was limited to 50 people. And we try to use that course as sort of like a lab in a way of how can we implement some of the UDL principles and some of the guidelines in the design of the course so that we could model universal design for learning. Because I found that a lot of places talk about UDL, and Kendra has a really good experience with this, but they don't do UDL. And so we wanted to not just talk about UDL, but also walk the walk, if you will, not only in the design of that course, but then it also inspired us to do this book. And we wanted as much as possible within the constraints of the publishing world and what it means to publish a book to try to make it, reflect some of the principles of universal design for learning. So that's why we have multiple levels that you can choose as you go through the content. That's a UDL concept, a UDL principle. And Kendra, I think you had a course on constructivism that wasn't very constructive, was it, right?
Yeah, there's lots of catalysts. I did in my Master's of Educational Technology. I took a constructivist course that was pretty traditional. So it encouraged me to build my own course as part of my master's. And part of that was, it was similar to the idea of diving to UDL and really looking at how you could create something online that wasn't all text-based reading, all assignments that everybody did the same, and those sorts of things. So that was definitely another catalyst.
And then finally, for me, the sort of a big idea that I hope came through in the book is that I'm really passionate about accessibility. And even within the world of UDL, I found that a lot of times people go right to the idea of providing choice and voice. But the thing is, if none of those choices are accessible, then are you really providing choice, right? It's a false choice for some students. And so that was really important to me, is to make sure that accessibility is a foundation. And so if you go to the companion website for this book, you'll see that all of the images have alternative text. We have long descriptions for some of the more complex images. Those benefit not only people who use screen readers, but there may be other learners who have, learning challenges who could benefit from the more explicit description and so on. Captioning for the videos is another example. So really thinking about that piece that for a long time has been missing from some applications of UDL is we kind of skip over that access piece and go right to it's because it's the sexy piece, right? Having students show their learning with video or with different technologies, that's sexy. But we can't ignore the accessibility piece because that's an equity component to this, making sure that everybody can participate.
All right, Omar has a question. Take it away.
Got it. Well, good evening, everyone. My question, I guess, for our authors for tonight in the panel, because I did something similar to Universal Design for Learning in a previous course before, and I guess one question that's kind of, stuck into my mind was, how can the principles of UDL organize existing resources under, a new approach, a new teaching approach, also adding in a little bit of that technology twist to it.
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is don't think of UDL as a new thing,
right?
Or as an additional thing, because what it really is an umbrella. It's an umbrella for you to take some of the best practices that are out there and be more intentional about them. That's a key concept of UDL, is that we are proactive and we are inclusive by design. Not by chance,
right?
Because by chance, you may be able to create some experiences where some students may be able to use it. Right. But with UDL, we think about that concept of variability, from the get-go. It's part of our DNA, if you will, and we plan for it. So I think the challenge is, if you think about it as one more thing, one of the things that I've seen in schools is that at some point we get to initiative fatigue. You all know what initiative fatigue is?
Kind of.
Every 2 years, there's a new thing that our administrator or superintendent went to a conference and thought, oh, this would be really cool to come back to my school district and implement it, wholesale, without really piloting it with a smaller group first and seeing if it's really a good fit.
Right.
So UDL, I think one of the key things is not to say this is a new initiative, but rather this is a way that we kind of bring in some of the things that we're doing and we look at them in a little bit more intentional way to see if they're really addressing the needs of all learners.
Okay.
Kendra, you have anything to add to that? Oh, now she's muted.
I do that all the time. For me, it's a bit of a mindset that, and it's not a program. It's not something that you can go and look up and here's how you do it. So for me, it's really about that experience. And what's interesting to me, even writing the book was probably some of my best professional learning I've ever done.
Okay.
And the idea that you're never an expert, that we're always developing and becoming expert learners. So I think if you embrace that yourself as the educator, and that you're going to continuously build this, but also that your learners can also inform your instruction as well, let you know if something works. But I think that mindset of always looking at, this may work for a small group of learners, but does it work for all of them? And I'm going to incrementally continue to improve my instruction. I know as educators, you always feel the pressure of do it, by the end of the semester, or do it by this date, and it's just not going to be that way. I think everything that you do makes an improvement for learners, I think is a win.
Yeah, Thomas Tobin, who's written a new book out on higher ed, and he uses the idea of +1 thinking. And the idea is, each week, what's one more thing you can do to lower barriers for learners? What's one more thing, one more way that you can represent information, or one more way that they can submit an assignment? Because as Kendra said, it's actually not just a mindset, it's a habit. So you do it, and it's like any muscle. The more you do it, the easier it gets. So it can become overwhelming at first, but if you take that sort of incremental +1 thinking approach, eventually it's going to become second nature.
Can you repeat that first name that had the +1 thinking?
It's Thomas Tobin.
Oh yeah, okay.
He's a friend of the show.
Thank you.
Sorry, I interrupt. When you said that the last time we spoke, Louise, I also thought about the +1 of sharing that one thing with another educator, because I know as educators, it's just ourselves. So I loved when I really thought about it after we hung up the phone, Louise, and I thought, do that one thing and then share that with one other educator and start to spread whatever it is you're thinking about.
Yeah, that's right in line with the idea of the expert other, right? And in the past, you needed a mentor to sit down with you, and that's the only way you could get this kind of learning to take place. But now the whole internet could be your mentor, right? Through online chats, through online communities. So the only way those communities work is if people like yourselves share your practices and what you're learning. Let's see. Somebody wanted to go next. Looks like Diana.
Yes. Okay. So I'm not sure if this is a great question, but I'm a brand new teacher this year. And so I haven't even had a whole year of experience. But as I was reading this book, I think Christina said, it's such a great book that I've talked to my coworkers about, that I really want to see if there's a way we can do some type of book study as a team, just because there was a lot of great ideas. But going back to accessibility, I just kind of wanted you to expand a little bit, because I have a student that is a struggling reader, and we have tested the student, and they're so far have there's nothing to show why she is struggling so much, like no dyslexia, no underlying factor. And so for accessibility, would it be, like what would be the great solution in that case, like on assignments that I need her to read, for example, a passage and answer questions? Because I think it's a great idea of giving them multiple assignment options, but at the same time, I also feel like, well, at some point she's going to have to do that sort of format. And so if I continue to give her other options, like, okay, well, of completing the same type of assignment, but in a different way, will she still be successful in the future to complete, the STAR test, a reading STAR test, for example? Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making myself clear or not.
No, that is a great question. Kendra, do you want to give it a shot first? I have an answer, but I'll let you go first.
No, you go ahead. You're our accessibility guy.
So I think one of the things that we try to sort of put out in the book is the idea of a gradual transfer of responsibility, and the idea of scaffolding. So when we think about some of these supports that we put in place, some of those supports are meant to be faded away over time, right? So for instance, with writing supports, you may have things like a sentence starter or a graphic organizer, but then over time, you don't have to provide those supports all of the time, right? It's up to the students to create their own concept maps or to not need that sentence starter all the time. But there are some things when it comes to accessibility that they're permanent supports. So for instance, if a student has dyslexia, something like text-to-speech, that's something that they may need for the rest of their lives. And I think what you want to do is expose them to a range of different tools. And over time, have them discover what works best for you, not what your idea of what works best for them is, but what tools work the best for them and the way that they like to learn. And this is really important because when they get to college, they're not going to have you. They're actually in college, you have to go to a central office and say, I have a disability. And not everybody is at that point where they can do that, because that's a really emotional experience. I speak from experience because I struggle with that, with self-identification and asking for help. And if they don't do that, if they don't self-advocate, then they're going to fall behind. And a lot of them end up dropping out. So it's really important as early as possible to expose students to a range of different tools so that over time they build what I call sort of their learning backpack. Those sorts of tools that they can go back to, whether it's a note-taking tool or a text-to-speech tool, and not a specific brand of those tools, right? Because those things change over time, but the specific features that would be helpful to them. And so that when they do get to college or they get to the workforce, they're ready with a set of not just tools, but strategies that they can apply. So ultimately, that's one of the ideas in the book, is that gradual release of responsibility to the learner. So they're empowered themselves to be able to ask for what they need. Anything else you want to add, Kendra?
How old is the student? What grade?
Second grade. So it's beginner reading.
Right. So, I mean, at that age, you still want to help them learn to read, and there would be that remediation. I always think there's a time comes when we just have to be really conscious that we're not just focusing on learning to read. And some of these tools that we provide give them the ability to do the same things that everyone else does. I find a lot of times that we remediate learners, we take them out of the class, sometimes when the really fun things are happening, to train, to teach them these skills, but they never get to do the real meaty stuff. And a lot of these accessibility tools let you do the meaty stuff. And I think sometimes we make those tools as it almost sounded like the text is the most important thing. Right? You want everyone to be able to read, but there are so many other ways you can show what you know, but there are sometimes you do need to read text, and these tools really help you. But I think if we can make those tools less about just for learners who struggle, and that maybe everyone can have access. So for example, in my master's, I did all of my reading with text-to-speech. I highlight it and I let my Mac read to me. And so because for me, it's about attention. I have attention issues. So for me, that's what really helps. But if I give that to everyone, some may use it, some may use it only when the text is really difficult, and it becomes a tool for everyone rather than just that one child who has some kind of a special need. So I think in the second grade, you'd still want them to be learning to read and do all of those things and be positive for whatever reason, but also start providing those tools, like Louise said, to start to explore them, but let everyone have access to them where possible.
And what that's going to do is one of the reasons why things like the iPad were so successful is because they've removed the stigma, right? It's not a specialized device. It's the same device everybody can go into a store and purchase. It's just that it has some accessibility features. And the same thing with the Chromebooks now, right? They have accessibility features built in. But if we start introducing them as personalization features, as opposed to accessibility features, because I don't like that distinction, because that's really what you're doing is you're personalizing your learning environment. The same way that sometimes we want to make the screen less bright, you know, or lower the volume or set up a different screensaver or whatever it is. It's just another way that we customize our devices. So like Kendra said, the more we can take the stigma out of it, the better. And also, we often focus, especially in special education, on deficits. So can we start thinking about also strengths and the things that people are good at, as well as considering those deficits or challenges that they have?
I like Megan is saying in the chat, I think the purpose of the task plays a big role. If you aren't measuring the students' reading, or the true purpose isn't reading, provide some support, text to speech, so they can access the content, the true purpose. I think that's so true. What's really interesting to me, when I used to have, even at second grade, and you provided, say, text to speech, you'd realize learners who were English as a second language, they sometimes would listen to it 3 times and listen really, really slowly. And it really made you aware of how fast you speak. And the fact that they can understand it, you just need to give them the ability to listen to it, say, 3 times, or listen to it faster for some of those learners. So I think it's really opening your eyes to that. I've always said, I've always let the learners know how I use the technology to take away that stigma. It's not about just those special learners. Everyone can use it at some point.
Yeah, I just shared in the chat one of my favorite expressions that summarizes UDL is tight on goals, loose on means. So what that means, I think, Megan, you hit it. You hit the nail right on the head, is always begin with a goal. Be clear on what the goal is. And then that will help you determine where you can provide the flexibility. Does that make sense? So key component of UDL is separating those two things, because in education, we often combine them, the goal and the means. So if we ask people to show their learning only by writing an essay, what exactly are we measuring? Their understanding of the concept, or their ability to put paper and pencil together, right, into a writing motion? So we need to always be clear on what the goal is. Megan says, read and write for Google. Absolutely. I highly recommend that extension. It's a really nice sort of Swiss Army knife. I'll recommend another one. By the way, you can get read and write for Google for free. Did you know that? All of you as educators, if you go to the Text Help website and you put in your educator email address, they'll give you a free premium account. That they say it's a yearly account, but it never expires. So you definitely want to check that out. And then a tool that I've really been turned on to lately is Microsoft Learning Tools. They're built into Microsoft Word. They're built into OneNote. They're built into the Edge web browser. It's very similar to Read and Write, with one big difference. It's free. Well, okay, it's free in the sense that if you already have Microsoft Office 365 and so on, then it's no additional cost. How's that? That's more accurate. But that's another tool that you should add to your toolkit is the learning tools, because it has text-to-speech, but it also has things like being able to divide the sentences into syllables, or the words into syllables, changing the appearance. Again, the idea is to be able to personalize the experience. For the read and write, Megan, if that's what you're asking, it's only for the teacher that's free. They got to make money somehow. So the students have to buy a license.
All right, Christina has a question.
Go for it.
So I had talked about how awesome I thought the book study was, and I've been talking to my partner, my coworker, and she teaches the math and science, and I teach the ELA side. And so this coming month, actually this Friday, we're going to be planning for the next 4 weeks a STAR review. And I've talked her into kind of using the UDL principles to help with our planning on Friday, that we're going to use that approach to plan all of our review lessons during our extension times in the classroom. So what I want to ask you is, do you have any recommendations for a team who's brand new to this thought process, brand new, I guess, what are some words of encouragement to kind of have everybody buy in, even though I feel like we kind of do a lot of this stuff, we're just not being more mindful about it. I just really want them to buy into it, and I feel like if we all work as a team, I think we're going to show some pretty awesome things going on in our school.
I would definitely, I think you're already off to a good start by thinking about it from a team perspective. I think a lot of people try to implement UDL on their own, and it's a tough hill to climb. So that's what I loved about working with Kendra on this book, because in doing that, we bring really unique variability, our own variability to the project, right? So Kendra's really good about visuals. She did all the images that you see in the book. Me, not so much. You guys would have gotten a bunch of stick figures if I had done the images. But I like to write, and that's the way that I think best. And so it's the same thing when you're thinking about getting started with UDL. I would say find another educator who wants to give it a shot, and then do it as a team, because you're going to be able to support each other and support your own learning. And then part of that too, I think that gets overlooked with UDL is there's a TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, that I recommend you all watch, because we don't do that enough in education. We don't show our process enough. And that is a key component of learning, is that you're a learner, yourself are going to make some mistakes. There's going to be some things that don't work out, and that's okay. And by you sharing that you're on your own journey with UDL, you open up a space where your students can then feel free to experiment and to try new things. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I like how Kendra had brought up, that sometimes students who are needing these extra supports are pulled out of the classroom when these fun activities are happening, or these extra enrichment opportunities that other students are getting and they're not. And that's what this time is. That's what this whole STAR review is going to be. And that's why I was like, you know what? I want them to self-advocate. Oh, I can start off on this objective in this manner. I can approach the learning this way, but actually own it. And I'd be interested to see how my students would be thinking, and everybody immersed in the classroom at the same time, and nobody's leaving or missing out on, what different activities they would want to choose or be a part of. So I'm glad that she brought that up, because I fought really hard this year to keep them in the classroom and not have them leave, because they do miss those opportunities, and that's where you see so much growth and creativity.
Mm-hmm.
So were you referencing working with other educators? Is that what the question was?
Yes. Well, so it would just be my 4th grade team, and so I'm going to be planning with one other teacher. So we're going to make the lesson plans. It's we call it ELT time. It's extended learning time. So it'd be going back through different objectives that we want to review back through that they might be tested on. But doing it in a fun, extended way, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would want these other teachers to kind of buy in, because the plans are going to look different. They're going to be a lot different than what they're used to.
Well, when you were talking, I thought that's what you meant. I'm deconstructing what you've already done, and like you were saying, celebrating some of those things that are already happening and being more intentional. We'll also kind of look at, hey, look what we're already doing, is a really good way for people who are maybe new to it. But like you say, it's not just by accident, but by design. So I think allowing people to bring ideas and be open in the discussion of what you might want to do. But I think the final chapter, Helen, I think it's the final chapters this week are kind of where we do deconstruct a little bit. So that might be an area to help you. And then we also have on our website, we have the link to a planner. Now the planner has a lot in it, but it might spark some ideas around maybe your focus is the environment, or maybe it's the type of inquiry questions you're going to do. There's all kinds of suggestions there to maybe spark some discussion about what you could do to make it fun and to make it engaging and bringing all those learners together. And then I think the other piece is, and you mentioned it, is really sharing with the learners. Get them involved and get them starting to realize that we know everyone's different. And we talk about that in diversity, but we sometimes don't really celebrate that diversity of the way we think. And so really celebrating all those different ways that learners think. And like Luis and I say, we're very different, but Luis challenged me in the book to think in different ways, and that was such powerful learning for me. So same with the learners, to not say that one learner is better than the other, but to really embrace that as well.
So yeah, that's why I think it's so powerful for you to share some of your own variability with your own learners, and how you do things differently, and what supports do you use. Like I'm sure on your smartphone, you set reminders for yourself and use a calendar and all of those things. And those are the things we don't share with our learners. So they think it's like an unusual thing, right? So taking it's not unusual, right? It's something that we all do. And then working with a team would be great. And thinking about the book and the planner as a tool to study your curriculum, so it's always getting better. So the same way that learners have like a growth mindset, we want the curriculum itself to be in that position, to have a growth mindset itself.
Right. And that's like where I'm thinking.
Good. You're on the right path.
So I'll jump in with the next question, because I'm hearing from everybody here that this is really exciting work. It's really hard and challenging work. It can be very problematic work. You've got this great book, and you've got the companion website that you've designed to support the book. But I just want to know, are we doing this alone? Sometimes when I'm working on it, I feel like I'm the only one doing. So what shift are you seeing happen in the conversations that you're having with other people about the book and about the website? And how alone are we?
You're definitely not alone. I mean, there's it's funny because if you go on Twitter, there's something called UDL Chat. And after you finish with the book, I want to give you some homework. I think that's your next piece of homework, is to follow that hashtag, UDL Chat. It's actually some of the leaders in the field of UDL, including, Kendra, right? You're a leader in the field. Helen, I think you've joined a few times, Susie. So this is a great place where people sort of bring their questions and bring their challenges that they have in their practice, and then use the community, right? Crowdsource some of these challenges that we have with our practice. Because stronger, we're better than just one person trying to do it alone. So I emphasize, like you said, Christina, if you can find another educator that you can work with, that's going to be sort of multiply your practice, if you will, because both of you are going to bring some unique perspectives to it. And Susie just shared the UDL chat tag there. So I highly recommend that. The other thing is Dr. David Rose, who sort of started the UDL movement at CAST, and who I actually work for CAST now, so I get to see him every once in a while. But he had this saying that has stuck with me, and he said, teaching is emotional work. And then in the book, I wrote the foreword to another book, and I said, teaching is more than emotional work. Teaching is civic work. We don't think about it that way. So let me break that down a little bit. Teaching is emotional work because it's all about relationships. We think that it's about content, and it's not about content. It's about relationship. I want to ask you all, remember like the favorite teaching or learning experience you've ever had. Do you remember any of the content? Or do you remember the educator that actually cared about you and believed in you and pushed you forward and mentor you, right? So I think that's what he meant by that teaching is emotional work. But teaching is also civic work. So in the book, we talk about developing expert learners, but we want to go beyond that. We want to develop good citizens. So people that are able to function in a democratic society and that are able to push that society forward with new ideas and different ways of thinking, different perspectives. So it's both emotional and civic work. And I probably did not answer your question, but it's...
Well, I was going to say, Helen, that Louise and I have been really lucky because people have been reaching out to us. So in terms of you're asking us, like, I really feel positive how many people are really looking at universal design. And what's really exciting is they're not doing it as a program. They're not saying, tell me what to do next Tuesday afternoon. And they're reaching out. I was going to say on my phone, I was looking at the number of people who DM'd me and said, hey, can you do a book talk? Can you do, we're doing this. And I think that's really been hopeful for me. And the conversations are just, they just really make me happy because people are really talking about learners and really taking this opportunity to make a difference, where before it really was a lot of we can't make the change, or this is too hard, or my district won't use the technology. And I'm not hearing that. I'm really hearing people saying, hey, I can do something to make learning better for learners, and I'm going to do it. And so that's kind of the message we've been hearing over and over again. And people really excited as well, which has been fun.
I just saw somebody share that book, the one where I provided the foreword.
Oh, that was me.
Just a little happen to have that link.
Kendra, do you want to explain the document that you shared in the chat?
Yeah, so it's funny. Every time I come back, I say, oh yeah, we did make that as well. It was one of those crazy big documents. I'm going to need to look at it because I'm so visual. I'm going to have to look at it. It's on another screen here. One of my accommodations is a very large screen, so I can actually see what's on the page. So what we created, I should say, was just a real way to look at a bunch of ideas that might get you started. And I really wanted to look at all sorts of different aspects of UDL. So if you go into it, you'll see there's a flexible instructional design section. And it just takes you through, if you want to look at learner variability, what might you do at the weighed-in level or the deep dive? And I really thought about it as, again, I didn't want it to be a checklist. It was really a way to go, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And one of the areas that I added to here was actually the environment. If I can take a look here, see if I can find my page. Let me see, go through. Sorry, it's been a while since I've been in my document here. So I did the physical environment. If you're in, it's on slide 14. And it was funny because the more Louise and I started talking, we actually had ISTE ask us to do, I think we did an article on kind of inclusive environments. We started looking at not just the physical, but your social environment. And what are some of those ways that you can support learners in those different areas? So it's just a way to have a discussion, to maybe try that one more thing if you haven't thought about how you might make your social environment inclusive or your actual physical environment inclusive. And sometimes starting with things like the physical environment are a nice way to have those tangible changes that people can actually see. Oh, why did you do this? Well, here's why. So there's that aspect, and then there's deep inquiry and understanding. So there's a section on that. And then there's the ownership of learning. So looking at self-reflection, metacognition, executive function, all of those lower levels that you may of UDL. And for me, that was a really big piece around agency, self-monitoring, because I started my career in a behavior class where we pulled all the kids out. I think they were only 5 years younger than me at the time, some of them. But again, it was all about that. It was funny because that relationship piece that Louise talked about was exactly what it was about. It was about those learners, nobody wanted them. Nobody wanted them in their class. And it was really, these were pretty amazing kids when you got to know them. But I think it's about understanding yourself as a learner. And I think, Louise, you mentioned, somebody else mentioned about that. People are afraid to self-advocate at all kinds of levels. I know in my work environment, I know there are people that have dyslexia and they're not going to say a word. So it's about understanding yourself and being reflective and being able to say, this is what I need as a learner. I think it's probably the most powerful thing we can teach our learners, because they can then advocate for themselves and not feel that they're different, but just feel that they have a slightly different need that needs to be met. So that's basically what that is. It looks like a lot, but I suggest just choosing one or two things that maybe you haven't thought about and maybe use that as a discussion or a one more thing.
So wait, Kendra, are you saying that they can dip their toes, go for a shallow swim, maybe take a deep dive?
You can. You definitely can. So it's broken down that way. And if people have suggestions, please let us know. I mean, one of the things for this, one of those things where you make something and you need to actually go in. So I've had people DM me and say, hey, you didn't link up something on the website correctly. And I really appreciated that. But also feedback is hey, we had this idea, or, that didn't really work for us. So please feel free to give us that feedback as well.
Yeah, we're both pretty open about our own learning. So, and that's key. It's not like we're just another learner, basically. That's the way I look at myself. Someone who's on the same journey that you are, learning about UDL, learning about technology, and so on. So we'd really appreciate your feedback.
We probably have time for one more question, and Michelle has volunteered, so go ahead.
I didn't have a question so much as a general comment, because I had such an aha moment. We were working on the activities for this book study, and one of the assignments was creating a comic, and I had this idea in my head, and I was trying, I'm sure it was for 2 hours, trying to make the website create the comic that was in my head, and it wasn't happening. And so I was like, I just cannot do this anymore. And of course there were other options to choose from. And it was really just like the aha moment of, you don't have to struggle through when you have a barrier to your learning. You can pick another course of action. And I think that was, I don't know, ever since then, I've thought about how, UDL strategies, we can apply them to professional development and, conferences and stuff. And so everything's not such a sit and listen type environment, and how much better it could all be. And so that was my aha moment.
Aha.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think sharing those things with your learners as well are so important. Sometimes it's worth the struggle with something, but other times if you're not able to communicate what you want to communicate, and I guess I think about the learner who struggles to read and write, what they must feel like every day, because it's obvious that's the best way, and gee, I can't do that. So thank you. That's a real powerful aha moment.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned professional learning, and that was a big part of the book too. Is that in our every school there's two curricula at work. There's the explicit curricula, right? The things that textbooks, all of that stuff. But there's also an implicit or hidden curriculum. And for the teaching profession, a lot of that hidden curriculum is how we do our professional development. So we want learners to do certain things, and then we go to a room and sit all in neatly in rows, looking to the front of the classroom as one expert, dumps content into our brains. So that over time kind of replicates the same practices from one teaching generation to another. So whatever we can do, even if it's a small thing like sit and chat or share with a partner, any little thing we can do to disrupt professional learning, eventually is going to find its way into the classroom and change practices. So this is something that Kendra and I have to say, is something that we struggled with in the book. We went back and forth. That first section on getting to know yourself as a learner, but we, in the end, decided that it was really, really important to have that in there. Because a lot of UDL has to be modeled. It has to be a change in practice rather than you telling somebody, this is the way you learn best. They have to discover it for themselves, because that's when you really own it.
Yeah, we did get a bit of pushback that we didn't talk about, sorry, Helen, but we didn't talk about the UDL first in the book, but my background was about professional learning and development, and just how you needed to own your own learning if you wanted your learners to own their own learning. So that was, we did have a little bit on that, didn't we, back and forth, but
it worked out.
And I just wanted to offer the website that's been designed for this book study as a model for anyone who wishes to extend this to wherever you're working. You just use that as a way to structure your own PD for your own school, for your own self, however you can structure it. It's there, given freely. It doesn't mean that you need permission to use it. Just go ahead and use that as a model. And I know Kendra and Luis will be very happy to see you linking to the website that they've designed to support the book. So definitely keep sharing it out, because I think the more we can, the more value we'll get back out of it too.
Yep.
Yeah, your website was beautiful, really nicely done. And I think it's nice to have that set up. I was thinking about what an expert you are in that online learning environment, and we know why, but it really showed in that your website that you designed. Absolutely.
Keeping it very simple and very kind of clean design and easy to read. And thanks to Susie for doing helping with the step down, checking in, making sure we've got all the right things in the right levels.
Detail oriented, it comes in handy every once in a while. We have some interest in the chat in STEM applications to UDL, and I know that we had some resources about that from the INSTE conference a few years ago. Maybe we can dig those up, and we can continue that conversation on Twitter. And
could actually add them to the resources page on the website if we've got them, and that way people can get access to them as well.
Yep.
So I want to thank you guys for taking the time tonight, afternoon, for joining us in the conversation around the book, and for putting the work into the book, to make it happen. It's been a great learning experience for us to work through it this month.
And for all of you who jumped into Flipgrid, way to go. That was so much fun to watch.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us.
Keep making learning inclusive.
And thank you, Helen and Susie, thank you.
Take care, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.